And we are live. Hello today. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us in our discussion about SE. Today, I have an interview with Mark Solomon. Mark Solomon is a podcaster that Reid Nicewander introduced me to. And I listened to even an hour of his stuff, and I came to a 90% confidence that I would like to learn things from Mark and that my audience would really like to learn. Mark, tell us about yourself.
The most important thing you need to know is that I have chickens as well. And I see you have chickens, and sometimes chickens interrupt me during my broadcasts, since now that I'm broadcasting outside ever since COVID. So um, that is, we have that in common. Um, but I haven't been doing SC for very long. I I didn't really know much about SE until I just stumbled across Reid's videos and I began watching them. And I was probably just halfway through my first video when it just dawned on me that this just cognitive behavioral therapy is what this is. I mean, it's just we're instead of reality testing somebody's belief about themselves, we are testing someone's claim about the universe. And it's pretty much the way similar way to go about it. And as a clinical psychologist, I would talk this way to patients when I have the reality test the claims about themselves. But um, I liked what Reid was doing so much, and I thought that this was such an important thing to do that I just thought I'd give it a shot, and that's really how it happened.
Awesome. Uh, I found you unusual in that you didn't read the books. You just watched some of Reid's and Anthony's videos, and obviously you cheated by being a cognitive behavioral therapist. That apparently put you a significant leg up.
Well, I've been doing this for years. I mean, but just in a very different context. What I do on the show,
Mm-hmm.
the radio show or the podcast or whatever, it's not. I'm not functioning as a psychologist. That would be unethical. But I
Okay.
am just. But the same techniques that I would use as a psychologist, I would just use testing claims about whatever the person has about the universe, and
Okay.
yeah, and so yeah, I saw Reid's videos, and actually, I didn't even know Anthony's videos existed until later. So, but
Oh, wow.
I've since seen his videos too, and
Okay.
I mean, I thought I've learned from both. I mean, they're obviously they're both the gurus in the SE field, and
Mm-hmm.
so I've definitely learned a lot from looking at both of them. So yeah.
Yeah. Um, so can you tell me about the overlaps between SE and cognitive behavioral therapy, the techniques that we're using that are used in both?
Yeah.
And are there formal names for them in the other field that maybe we should be using better jargon?
No, I think jargon's fine. I think so. Cognitive behavioral therapy is you sit down with someone, with a patient or a client, and they're having trouble functioning in the world. They have trouble adjusting in the world, and you try
Mm-hmm.
to find why that is. You try to reality test whatever thoughts they have about themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
it's under the idea that people have these automatic thoughts about themselves, like I'm not worthy, or I can't
Mm-hmm.
do this, or
Mm-hmm.
no, or if people have tendencies like to catastrophize, like if
Mm-hmm.
one small thing happens, then they say, well, the whole world's ending, like those kinds of things. And you reality test those claims about the universe with their history of what's really true. And
Mm.
and you test what's really true in their lives with what they say is true about themselves. And then you have them
Aha.
hold both in their hands together, and you see a
Yeah.
dissimilarity, and that's when change happens. To put that in a nutshell, hopefully I explain that well.
Yeah.
And then in
Yeah.
SE, what I try to do is when someone makes a claim about the universe, Well, the first thing I do, the most important thing I do is probably as important as the SE is, and other people have talked about this, is absolutely 100% is rapport. You
Hmm.
have to have really good rapport with the person, which I find amazing because when I see Reid and Anthony's videos, they often, it's quick. They launch right into it and they put a timer on. And I think it's amazing they're able to do that. Um,
Hmm.
and I come at it a little bit differently. When I sit down with somebody, what you don't hear on the podcast or the radio shows, I'm just
Hmm.
talking with them for 20 minutes, 30 minutes about
Mm.
nothing, about just whatever they want to talk about, really,
Okay.
the weather or
So just
what
deep
they
rapport
do.
building ahead of time.
I just hang out and chat with them, and that
Hmm.
that takes me half the way. It really does. I
Hmm.
mean, if you can have this a good rapport with somebody and they trust you, and already they're not starting from a defensive point. They're starting from,
Right.
well, let's explore this together kind of thing. And so I try to do that. And once I feel that that's been established, then I'll launch into the SE. Um, and and that's, I'm not as good as Reid or Anthony, and because they go right into it and they have their lines of reasoning, and
Hmm.
it's cool to follow them how they do it. And
Yeah.
I sort of more take the journey. Like I have a question in my
Mm.
mind, and I think I'll get there. Like it'll come up again. I'll figure it out. I'll get there. But sometimes I won't ask quite the right question the way I intended to ask it, and like it doesn't quite bring me to where I want to be. But it's a long format. I'm doing
Yeah.
an hour
Yeah.
podcast or whatever, and I eventually get there. Eventually I make a mental note that this is something I want to explore later, and I explore it. And so I think what I do is a little bit easier than what those other guys do.
Yeah. They're shooting for a time because they're trying to make very specific teaching
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
I am too, and I also am really letting go of time a lot, and just assuming that if it's interesting, I can cherry pick
yeah.
later, and maybe I can edit down and call things out for short version of things. But I
Well,
don't
it's
know.
interesting
So
because I never really knew why the time constraint was there. I mean, I never knew why they did that. I mean, so you're telling me just so it becomes a teachable moment? Is that why?
I, yeah, it might also be a question of getting enough interlocutors. When I'm doing public events on Discord servers, I try to get to 2 or 3 interlocutors per hour so that all the interlocutors get a chance to talk. If I'm
Oh,
listening to the same person for the hour and a
right.
half that it might actually take,
I see.
I the audience doesn't get enough interaction. So it's a balance between audience interaction and the best quality for each elenchus.
I see. Yeah, I just didn't know if there was, what the theory was behind it. But no, I think that's interesting. Um, whoops.
Yep, I'm going to. Okay, my video has recovered. I had a brief dropout. Okay, that happens.
Yeah. Um, but I think it's
Yeah,
very.
Reid replies. I guess the assumption is YouTube viewers have short attention spans.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a Reed's on. Oh, I see. Cool. I
Yeah,
see.
Reid's here.
Oh, I've never actually spoken to Reid. I'm glad he's there. I really respect what Reid does quite a bit. And what I do, what I expect, what I really respect most about him is that he does something that I find that it would be very difficult for me to go to
Mm,
a public park,
mm,
camp my butt down there, and just put myself out there and have people, I'm just my
hmm.
personality style. That would frighten me. And
Okay,
so,
that's interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's cool that he does that. I do it more of a when I'm asking somebody if they want to talk, or it's usually email exchanges first. And
Uh
for
huh.
every one person I get on the show that I've asked to come on the show, maybe 25
Hmm.
people say no or don't respond. So
Wow.
it's a high, as you would imagine, it's a pretty high turn down rate because
I'm getting such better odds than that. I'm getting
no,
about
I'm getting
50-50.
no, really. No, I
Yeah. No,
No, I
the
don't
thing
think.
is, in almost all of those cases, I have been in a public event where I have interacted with them, either as they make a claim or I make a claim and they interrogate or something like that. So I'm selecting from the people who I've already done some SE with.
Yeah. Oh, I think we lost you. I think we lost him. Well, should I? Yeah. So what I do have a high turnout rate. I think that makes sense because people are talking about, I'm asking people, would you talk about your beliefs? And that
Hmm.
automatically puts people strike one against you on the defensive, and I get that.
Hmm.
It's a difficult topic, I think, for people to discuss on air, even when you are saying I want to talk about your belief, and what easier thing, presumably, would it be for you to talk about than your beliefs? And but people do seem to shy away, especially when they there's I want to be completely open. So every time I ask somebody, I send a link to a prior broadcast or a prior podcast, because I don't. I mean, I don't. This is not a secret of what I'm doing. I want people to know, and if they want to prepare, that's fine. But that's probably why I get a lot of turndowns. Is people will listen to a show and then they decide it's something they probably don't want to do. It's okay.
Yeah,
And usually when I do people
yeah.
get people on, it's because I've sent them the link, and usually they just don't listen to the link.
Okay,
So
yeah. They don't step up to the question. That's fine.
yeah.
Okay. Is there any claim that you would refuse to examine?
Is there a claim that I've? No, I don't think. Um, well, probably given my background, I'd feel uncomfortable with like anti-Semitic claims and other kinds of claims like that. I think I would probably not be your guy to do that with. I think I would like to. It's better if I am emotionally detached, I think. So something like that, I think, would be difficult for me to to divorce my feelings about and just investigate the claim. And also, I probably would be nervous to do that.
Okay, okay.
I don't know if I answered your question.
Um, I think so. By the way, if any of the local Discordians want to post a question to Mark, you can type it, and the producers will process it through. Or if you'd like to ask him in your own voice, let us know. We'll unmute you and
Sure.
go from there.
And I recognize some people there too. I see Nicholas. Hi, Nicholas. And
Okay.
there's Reed. And oh, cool. Yeah. It's now that I've been in the
Yeah.
community for a while, it's cool. You get to you recognize people from Reddit and recognize people from the Facebook SC page and here now, which I didn't even know existed. But so yeah, I like this. I like the SE community because um, my experience of them so far, of them or us or whatever, is it's very anti-trolly for the most part. That it's, people really are there to learn and kind of help each other, and I like that. That's nice.
Have any of your interlocutors ever lost their temper and abruptly departed?
Yes, I had one. It's the same one, and I'll never air it. It's the same one who sat down with me, and I realized relatively quickly that the person was probably a little emotionally unstable. Maybe just wasn't really up to doing this, and I probably, in retrospect, should have stopped it right there. But the person was sitting there, and it was kind of hard not to do anything about that. So just sitting there, I decided to kind of go into it, and then I regretted that. Then the person left, and that was my fault because there were the signs that I probably should have just stop the
I
interview. It's
see.
just not worth it.
I'm going to
Um,
step out of the room for just a moment and back in for video freezing reasons.
all right. Hi there.
Okay, now I see
Good.
you and you're moving again. Thank you.
All right.
Sometimes this happens. That's one of the reasons why we use Discord is sometimes, I'm sorry, Skype, because sometimes Discord has this droppy thing problem. Oh, yeah, we're totally doing it live. That is so true. May I have the next question? Yep. How often, when doing SE in public, do you have a reasonable fear or an unreasonable fear or maybe stage fright?
Every time. I get
Every
nervous.
time.
Every time I sit down with somebody, I get nervous. I really do. Um, I want to do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be clear headed. I want to
Mm-hmm.
be able to be present in the moment where when somebody introduces a claim or says something, that I'm flexible to enough to recognize it and to
Mm-hmm.
move down that path. And sometimes, like I'll listen to. I'm sure we're all our own worst enemies in that sense, but I'll listen to myself and after I've done a broadcast, and I'll say, I should have said this here, or I should have said that would have been a good point to. And I'm sure you've had the same experience. I would imagine, and
Everything I've
or
done is
not.
live. No, everything. I actually haven't done any edited released later SEs. I
Well,
started
it's live,
live
but
on Twitch with Reid
yeah.
and live on Discord with people, and
Do
so
you
I
not
haven't.
do you not second guess yourself when you
Oh, I
see like
totally do. I
yeah?
totally do. But there's no opportunity to pull it back. I gotta just
Oh
live with it. I
right,
gotta call myself on it,
just call it
and
right.
usually what I'll do is just openly say, I broke a rule here. It was I brought these facts. I broke a rule there. And I'll just say it. And then people either forgive me or they don't. But it becomes a teaching moment.
Yeah, no, I get nervous. I do. Maybe it's just my personality too, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to do a good job, and I think sometimes I think I'm listening to someone. I'm like, is this even worth what I'm doing right now? And
Mm-hmm.
so, and so I do get nervous about it, especially. I mean, probably because I haven't been doing it for too long,
Mm.
and I think
26
that
podcasts. That's a while.
well, maybe 6 months worth,
Okay.
and and SE is it's a skill. I mean, it's something that you practice and that you get better at. I know of. I mean, I kind of come from a different background than most, but um, it's something you definitely can get better at, especially when you have an interlocutor and they say something, and then oh, I've recognized this. This has happened before.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've done
Mm-hmm.
it. I've done this. Like I've been here before, and you have a better sense of where to go and that kind of thing. But it's
Mm-hmm.
also it's easy to because of me getting nervous about it. Sometimes I can get stuck in a rut about like having the
Mm-hmm.
same kind of thought experiments because I know how they unfold or and not
Sure.
try new things. But I try to branch out a little bit too on that.
Cool. Yeah. I for myself, I
Yeah,
have ridiculous, overwhelming stage fright, even on
yeah,
simple things. Even going out into a crowd at Disneyland is too much for me, unless
yeah.
I have a role that I can study for. If you gave me a uniform at Disneyland and say,
Right,
go be a Tin Man. Oh, I'm ready. I'm good. I know exactly what's expected of me. I can just do this. Go be a Tin Man. Go be a Tin Man. No problem.
right.
But the idea of being an
But
ordinary person, that's far too complicated. I don't know how to do that at all. Oh,
that's funny. Well, that's the thing. I'm an actually extreme introvert, so
yeah, me too.
it's another. Yeah, I don't. People probably have some misconceptions that people who do this kind of thing have no problem being in front of people, but I have a lot of problem doing that. I'm
Yeah,
nervous
yeah.
now.
Yeah, I am, but in a good way. I'm okay with it. It feels fine.
Yeah, but what I really like,
It
what
feels like caffeine.
when you're doing good SE, it's
Yeah,
there's not a better high when you're kind of in that groove
yeah.
and you're not even really thinking about it too much. It's just generating. It's just the next
Mm-hmm.
step is coming to you, and the next question you ask is where you go. It just seems like the logical process, and that hasn't happened too much. But sometimes when you're in that groove, you feel it, and and that's
Hmm.
really it feels good. You know, I feel like you're doing something that's right, feeling that you're
Hmm.
doing something that's, you know, maybe making a difference. Who knows?
Somebody comments, "I'm an extrovert without shame. It's a problem." Well, it's not been a problem for me so far, but I've only known you for a week or two.
It
Next
probably
question, please.
makes you good doing SE in public, I would imagine.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
you'll have to tell us, Nicole. The Real Reading has a question. Would you like to voice it or
Yeah, sure.
Yes, go ahead.
Uh, so I was talking to Dali about this earlier, but I would love to see some actual research conducted on SE. But for that, before that to happen, it's got to get the attention of the people that would do the research. Have you heard, or being in the field of psychology, are you
Yeah.
hearing it being brought up more, or
In my, in my field, when I bring this up to fellow psychologists or friends or people I went to internship with or anything like that, no one has heard of SE. But to be honest, I hadn't heard of SE really before 6 months ago. I mean, and that's, I don't know who's in charge of our outreach campaign. I mean, I'm joking, of course, but it seems like something to me that is really important, which rivals the importance of when I actually see patients. I mean, I really think conducting SE is like the antidote to what's going on right now. I don't know what other answer there is. I mean, to the power of conversation, to the power of us talking and asking questions and having people examine their own beliefs. I don't know what else truly there is there. And I'm very passionate about it. And I think there should be studies on it. I imagine that there's not, because it's just not known. Um, and But I'm glad we're all here talking about it now, and that we can make it known.
Indeed, indeed. Um, yeah, several months ago, I spent I don't know, a day or two looking into what it would take to make some study something happen, and
Yeah.
it was monumental. Just the structure of what it would take to get started was so far beyond the resources I had available that
What's your
I just
background?
had to put it on the shelf.
Is your
I'm
background
retired. I used to be a computer programmer.
Okay, I see. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, to conduct a study like this, I'm just trying to think of how we would do it, but I mean, what would be the control arm? And I don't know how that would
Yeah, I'm
work.
not sure what
But
we're measuring yet either, other than the first one of measuring that we're not doing harm. That would be
Have
imagine that we're
that
you
would
not
be the
doing
first one.
harm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, right. Well,
have you have you read How to Have Impossible Conversations? There are like a really rich notes that you actually can go through these studies cited there.
oh, really? Yeah, I haven't read um, the typical books people have read in this, and I
Mm-hmm.
plan to. It's just that
Mm-hmm.
I just come to from it from a different area angle, and I think what I told Reed was, yeah, I see that, how to have impossible
Mm-hmm.
conversations. Cool. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and when I first started doing the show, I texted Reed, um, and I just basically told him that when I'm doing my show, I just try to model myself after him, and I think of how Sam Harris would ask a question, because I really like how he asks
Mm-hmm.
questions as well. And I don't
Interesting.
know
You should mention that.
if that's controversial or
Yes.
not,
I don't think so.
but I like uh, I like how both people do their approach, and I try to kind of keep that in mind um, when I'm doing my SE. If that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
All right. What actions could an examiner take that would disqualify a conversation from being SE by your personal definition of SE, not what you think the general, but for your standards? What
Say
would
it again now.
disqualify? What kind of actions could an examiner take that would disqualify a conversation from being your kind of SE?
My kind of SE. Can you give me an example of what you mean Maybe I'm just not
Oh, sure.
understanding.
If I hit you with a hammer, that would be against rapport. So that would be an example for me.
So if you were conducting
anti-
SE with me and you hit me with a hammer.
Yeah,
Oh, I see what
yeah,
you mean. Okay, so
yeah, totally.
so what you're saying is it appropriate to maybe strict SE, you're asking questions and you're not interjecting any kind of statement or value judgment. Maybe?
Okay,
I mean, is that what you're saying?
that might be it. That would be one answer, that you should not bring a position, argue from a position when
Yeah.
you're coming into SE. That was one answer I got.
Yeah, I'm of two minds of that. And because I've done both. I've done it both
Mm-hmm.
ways. And I like the blank slate model where you're just asking questions and have the person discover what they're going to discover on their own accord. But then I try to think of how change happens, how behavioral
Mm-hmm.
change happens. And the goal of SE is, I presume, for people to examine their own beliefs
Yeah.
and the reliability of their beliefs and presumably
Yes,
change
yes.
their beliefs if it is discovered that the beliefs might not be as reliable as they thought.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so,
I look at it like having them adjust their conclusions based on their information, their reason, not mine.
yes, that's right. And so what the research does suggest that when true change happens, you
Mm-hmm.
want there's maybe a misconception is that you don't want the person to be anxious, or you don't want them to be um, offended, or I don't know if that's the right word, but there needs to
Mm-hmm.
be some level of anxiety. There has to be for change
Okay.
to happen. Change really doesn't,
Interesting.
behavioral change or a belief doesn't happen unless you're
Yeah.
showing them, like you're putting two things in their hands that don't make sense. And that, by definition, should raise their
Hmm.
anxiety level. And then someone would search for a way to reduce the anxiety level. One way would be to
Okay.
change the belief, kind of a cognitive dissonance thing, to change the belief
Yeah.
to the.
Yeah.
And so, and so, you know, I might introduce a statement or something like
Mm-hmm.
that if I think it's going to make them a little uncomfortable, but not terribly uncomfortable, a little bit
Hmm.
where they might like think, whoa, especially if I haven't done it the entire time we've talked, and all of a sudden I give them a point of fact or something, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that can, you know, shake somebody a little bit. But I know that's not true SE as is often discussed, but I
I'm asking about your version. Your
yeah,
optimum
yeah.
version of SE.
But
Yeah.
I think about my goal. I'm really trying to have somebody examine their own beliefs, and me too. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll examine mine as well. And it actually, before I even start an SE um,
Mm-hmm.
talk with somebody, I have a little paragraph that I read to myself silently before we
Oh.
talk, that I tell myself what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and I tell myself, because I have to remind myself that I might be wrong. This person I'm talking to might be crystal clear and might be, what he's saying is
Mm.
very cogent, and I might be batshit
Mm-hmm.
insane. And if that's
Yep.
the case, I really want to know it. I mean, if what I'm
Yes.
saying is if what I'm thinking is not correct, I really do want to know it. But sometimes it's easy when you're conducting SE to fall into a default position where that person has a belief where their evidence is unreliable before even getting into the
Mm.
belief. It's easy
Mm-hmm.
to come at it that way. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah. It's
really
easy to
try not
assume.
to. It's very easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
The more theistic, the harder it is for me, and that's something
yeah.
I have to be very careful. Although mostly I just figure out ways to hide my bias behind arguing as much for or against a solution and that kind of thing. It, I give them
Yeah.
a hypothetical alternative position. I'll say, so I have a friend that has this position, and I have this other friend
Right.
that has this position.
Yeah,
How
I
would
do
you
that.
answer them?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
always like
I take
I
myself out
divorce
of
it.
arguing the position.
Yeah, sure, right. You have a third person
Mm-hmm.
do that as well, but sometimes we'll have somebody just ask you what you think, and if someone asks me,
Mm-hmm.
like, they'll ask me a direct question, and then I really do. If someone asks me a direct question, then
Mm-hmm.
you should answer a direct question. I mean, that's
Yep.
what they're asking you a question. So if
Yeah.
someone asks me what I think about something, and usually it'll be uh, when someone asks me a question, usually it's going to be something related to truth, that
Mm-hmm.
hurdle that's always so hard to get over to talk about other things often. But
Tic Tac test much?
yeah, I have a form I do that with chickens, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, with Reid's Tic Tac box, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
it's so I find that fascinating how many conversations you can have, and still you'll wind back right. You just fall back right
Mm-hmm.
there with even or odd or the whatever you use, and it's it seems often to happen so much. It just seems to be the crux of the problem of how we even just think about things objectively versus subjectively. And if we could just rectify that,
Mm-hmm.
we'd probably be halfway there.
Indeed. Next question, please. And all of you here in the audience, you get to ask questions too. This is your guest as much as he's mine. Well, no, he's been all mine so far. I've been keeping him to my. When would you abort an elenchus?
Yeah. Well, like that one time we're talking about when it was obvious the person was not quite stable.
Mm-hmm.
I should have aborted probably sooner. And but any kind of emotional psychiatric issue, um, you should I would suggest aborting. And I could see it happening, quite a bit because when someone has beliefs that are kind of far out there, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
there's a psychiatric flavor that, like a schizotypal personality or something unusual that might surface. So you might, you know, I could see how someone of these kinds of beliefs that we talk to would also have underlying psychiatric issues. I mean, I think that would be
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a reasonable statement.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah. So anything like that, I would abort.
Okay. And how does the abort look? Is that like an immediate thanks, I'm done now and leave the room, or is this let them talk for as long as they like and just not feed into it? How do you do that?
I just let them talk, and then I don't do SE. I just try to have a pleasant chat until we can wrap it up. Just try to make
Okay.
it just natural. I don't abruptly stand up or anything like that, but just wind it up and thank you,
Mm-hmm.
and
Let go of the
uh,
SE goals and just
just
let it be
yeah.
rapport until we're done.
This
Nice.
is not.
Nice.
It's not.
Nice.
Yeah.
Boris Budenoff, do you have a question? Anyway, next question,
Because
please.
when I do SE, I'm
Right.
not really, you know, which is also different than a clinical psychology practice. When I'm doing SE, I'm not really doing it for the person. I'm doing it for the audience. And I'm doing it
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I broadcast it as a radio show foremost than a
Mm-hmm.
podcast, is because I want people to listen to it, or I want people just to drive around and they just are searching through the dials and then come
Mm.
across it. Because I think if people are listening to it my show as a podcast, I'm probably preaching more to the choir, and these are people who are probably seeking me out who already know something about SE. And I produce it as a radio show because I want people who would, under no circumstance, listen to this, come across it and
Mm.
hear an SE exchange, and then think to themselves, hey, I do that, or I think this, or why do I think this? And so when I do it, I do it for the audience. I'm not doing it
Mm-hmm.
for the benefit of the person, even though the person would be nice if they did benefit. But I'm trying to do
Yeah.
like a bigger picture on that.
So, what radio station are you on?
So I'm on a station here. Well, my home station is a small town called Hillsboro, but I'm also on in
Okay.
Asheville, North Carolina, and
Okay.
Chapel Hill, Durham, North Carolina is another channel.
Sweet.
And if anybody knows a channel, please. It produces a radio show. I make no money off this, so I feel very strongly about it. So
Good. Have you experienced an interlocutor that was dishonest about their position? And I mean this in a context where steelmanning is not invited or expected.
I think what I sometimes have seen is that people who have listened to my show then come on my show and they feel reluctant or hesitant to say their beliefs on how and the level of how they probably sense or feel them. They tamper them down. It'd be my hunch, just because they don't want. Yeah.
They don't defend the full belief that they actually have. They defend something much more modest claim. Okay.
They make a more moderate claim, or they might change the claim to sound that would maybe in their mind resonate more with people, like, I believe we're all right. Those kinds of claims, instead of a specific claim.
Oh gosh, yes. Truth relativism.
Yeah.
That's such a that is a subtopic of SE on its own. It's like truth relativism over here and faith over here. Those are the two side channels of SE.
It's interesting because usually the people I get here who come on the show, and because I live in Chapel Hill, and it's a very kind of it's a liberal progressive area, and so I don't really get people who are more the fundamentalist right wing people to come on my show, although I'd love to have them on my show. It just, they don't come on my show. And so I usually end up getting people who are, more acupuncturists or the hoodoo practitioners or the, wow. or, more of what we're talking about, everything's relative, the postmodern feelings and thoughts that we're all correct and everything's true and we're all right. Which is interesting. I think that's more of kind of a recent thing, and it's not a classic liberal idea. A classical liberal idea. So I just find it fascinating. That's often what I see.
Next question, please. Do you keep a file of everyone you've SE'd on the off chance that they reach back out to you so that you can track their progress?
Yeah, I do. I keep and I reach out to them because I have these conversations, and these are long conversations that I have. I mean, it's an hour. It can be like an hour conversation, or however long it is. But for an hour conversation, I probably have to do at least an hour 15 minutes of recording, because I have to edit stuff and things like that. And so we're like, forging a relationship. And there's one minister who's in one of my first shows, and we still communicate. And before COVID came around, we would drink whiskey together. And so it's, sometimes it works out really nicely. And I like to I want to have ongoing relationships with people, just because a lot of the people I meet are nice. And also, I want to know if this works. I want to know if I can engender some kind of change, if I can, help, even in a small degree, this crazy shit that's going on in our world right now. And it really is. I mean, I think, people who, if you're on Discord or wherever, and you've thought about doing SE and you're learning to do SE, do it. Just try it. I mean, you have nothing to lose. And I say I'm nervous because I'm broadcasting what I do, but you can just do it and just try it. And I think it's really, really important. Imagine if so many more people did this, and I think we wouldn't be in part of the mess we're in right now. And one of the thought experiments I use in my show often is that I used a thought experiment. I say, let's pretend that we live in a time where there's a raging pandemic, and and someone comes along with a vaccine. Half the population believes that the vaccine is dangerous and it'll kill them, and they won't take it, and the other half says we should take it because it'll stop the virus and everybody will, live. And so that's a thought experiment I use, but that shows you how errant beliefs can really get us into some major trouble as a society. I mean, it can literally cause deaths. And if we can I'm not saying I have all the answers, but if we can just use an SE perspective to approach these problems. And I don't see people approaching these problems that way. You look at journalists, I don't see journalists approaching problems this way. If they're talking to somebody who, maybe if they're talking to two people, one person's pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine, I don't see them employing SE. I just see them asking just point of fact questions maybe, I think journalists should be trained in SE, and they should spearhead some of this because that's their job, literally. I mean, that's what they should do. They should find out the truth. I mean, that's what journalists, I think that's their function. And so I don't see journalists doing that. I'm trying to think if I know any journalist who does that. Do you know of one? I'm just trying to think of a journalist who you could say practices SE.
Not strictly speaking, but I think the best journalists are the ones, at least when I'm judging journalists, are the ones that most closely approach it. The ones that are able to compliment back somebody for following their own values and say, okay, I see how you got to that position, and are able to ask them questions about their own reasons and things like that. So there are some journalistic questions that lead in the direction. I don't think they're doing SE by that standard, but the closer they are, the better for me.
Yeah. I mean, do you have a name? I'm just curious what you think. I really want to know. I mean, because I just, I try to stay away from cable news as much as
No,
possible.
I don't have a name that I could call out that is currently doing it like I like to see.
Yeah.
It
is. Does that surprise you?
I don't have one.
Does that surprise you?
No, because I've come to realize in the last several months that there's actually only a very, very small cadre of people doing SE. So I'm not at all surprised that the standards that I would have for what qualifies as SE for myself aren't widely normalized.
Yeah, I don't know why this is not normalized. Why do you think that is? Why? I mean, and I didn't know about the community before, 6 months ago. Why do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that this? Is it that it's scary to people, or is it ring of atheism to people, or is it? I mean, I'm just trying to understand. I really don't know why more people don't know about it.
I'm just going to go with that. It's apparently okay. There's a lot of pushback against talk to critical thinking in religious circles, and so I think when people are demonstrating critical thinking and pushing it forward, they get pushed into the category of elitist. They get pushed into the category of getting hammered by some other means. Sam Harris gets so much pushback from the other side for such poor reasons.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. I do. Yeah.
So I think when we stand up and do SE, we are painting a target. Here, my target looks like that. Painting a target on our chest socially for people to strawman us and to try to bang on us, because we really do threaten the young earth creationist pretty hard. We really do threaten the woo merchant really hard, just by saying the only bias we're going to have is toward critical thinking. Now let's take that all the way. What happens?
Yeah. I think what maybe gives me hope is I think the young generation coming up, I don't know what we're calling them now, Generation Zs, or the kids that are the Zoomers, the kids that are protesting now. Again, that gives me hope, because I think the kids that are doing these sorts of things now, the kids can see through bullshit like nobody, and I think the younger generation is seeing what just these batshit insane beliefs can do to a society, and just because people just chose to believe in stuff, and what it's doing, and it's tearing us apart. And I think the younger generation, my senses, I could be wrong, my senses that the younger generation sees this as a problem where their parents might not. And I think that gives me some hope. So I think the SE community will grow, but I think it'll be the younger generation. I think.
I think Redding had another question. Is that correct?
All right.
I think the question might be, are there any aspects of SE that you believe could be integrated into everyday conversation?
Well, I mean, you could argue that SE it's just a way of living, it's a way of life. I mean, you know, it's a way of interacting with people. It's a way, if you want to interact with somebody in a pro-social way, one way not to do it would be to, here's my belief, and then that person says, well, here's my belief, and I'm wrong, you're wrong, and whatever. And so if you want to, you could argue that SE is just a way of interacting with other people. That's a pro-social way, and it's designed to draw out possibly commonalities, and when there's not commonalities, at least draw out uh, differences and the reliability of why these differences exist. And that is a lot of kumbaya, because I still have to go to Thanksgiving dinner like everybody else. So, but I think I think when you just interact with people, it's a good way to talk to people, asking questions.
Yeah,
Do you
definitely.
agree?
I do. And my family and intimates have noticed a very big difference in the way I've communicated over the last 2 years,
Oh,
and
really?
almost all of them are thumbs up and saying, "I'm glad you're doing it. It makes my communication with you easier." So
Well,
for their selfish
yeah.
reasons, it's good. It's
Good.
good.
Well, and it does diffuse situations, like if you're at Thanksgiving dinner and all you're doing is you're not
Mm-hmm.
stating what you think, or your belief or evidence or whatever, you're
Mm-hmm.
just asking questions and people are talking. That kind of it can diffuse a situation too, and depending on who you're talking to.
I haven't actually asked if you're a theist or an atheist, but I'm just going to ask, what evidence would you need to be convinced of the existence of a God?
Yeah, I mean, I would, atheist is I mean, I'm not the first person to say this. Atheist is kind of a strange word to be like, and Sam Harris talks about this as talking about in the sense of someone's proclaiming themselves a non-astrologer. It's a, it's a, it's a word that just means I am willing to believe whatever if there's appropriate evidence that comes along, commensurate evidence, whatever that claim
Yeah.
is. And then if there's a commensurate evidence, I'd be happy to believe in it. Whatever. I mean, it's just, I really try to be open, and I try to, explore my talks with SE people that way. But I think I mean, I guess I am an atheist in the sense that I haven't seen any compelling evidence to suggest I should re-examine that at this point.
Okay. So hypothetically, what could you learn tomorrow that would raise your confidence that a God exists?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, of course, I'm not the first person saying this as well, but it's it's a big claim, so it would require some evidence. Um, but if Jesus Christ came out of the clouds, and um, I'm not sure what he's supposed to do when he comes back, but whatever he is supposed to do, if he does that and floats around and stuff like that, I would absolutely re-examine my position. Um, I think I would be foolish not to.
Thank you. Next question. If you reach a point where your interlocutor says that they would change their confidence given X evidence, and you have the evidence, should you present it?
Right. So this is kind of what we were talking about before. So I've done this before. So my background's clinical psychology, but it's really more of clinical neuropsychology. So I've kind of studied the brain sciences. And so when someone makes claims, it's hard for me to keep my mouth shut when people make more of the mind-body claims. And I think if you've listened to the show, you'll see that. Like, I don't say much, but if someone makes a mind-body claim, then I kind of know. I know that evidence. I know that research pretty well, and so I kind of really will go there. I'll kind of want to see, like, I'll ask how they think the mind operates separately from the brain, or if the mind could operate if we had no brain. And I think that's I do sometimes go down that road.
So imagine that you're talking to somebody who desperately wants to teach people to do SE.
Imagine
What's your
what
evidence? No, what? I imagine that you're talking to somebody who desperately wants to learn to
wants to
teach
do
people
SE.
to do SE. I want to teach people to do SE.
You want
What's
to
your
teach people to
advice
do
to
SE.
me? What things should I make sure to cover? What are the most important checkboxes on the list for a teacher
Oh, I see.
of SE?
Well, I mean, I think, the rapport thing I talked about earlier, I think it's really important. But also, I mean, not that people aren't doing this, I guess, but it's easy to not be honest with yourself when you're doing SE. It's easy. It kind of relates to what I was talking about in the sense that you really need to teach people to approach every conversation with the idea, at least initially, the thought, the notion that you might be completely wrong. Everything that you thought to this point, your beliefs, the evidence that you've relied on, everything that you've seen up to this point could be wrong. And if you approach things that way, I think it'll make you better, because the interlocutor will see that. They'll see that you're open. I mean, you're still asking the appropriate questions, and um, you're still challenging, if you need to, the reliability of the belief that's being presented. But they'll be able to see that you'd be able to come to their side if you saw something, heard something that you had not expected or heard or saw before, and that will come across. And if people see the other thing, if they see the other, if they see, what they don't, I think they don't want to see. And I know SC and atheism isn't the same, and although I do fully recognize that probably a lot of people in SE probably are atheists, but
Yeah, there's a big
they
overlap.
don't. Yeah, but the person being interviewed probably to doesn't want to see you coming from the perspective is that I'm an atheist who doesn't have who's not burdened by the beliefs that you're burdened with, kind of thing. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah,
yeah,
I gotta not have that attitude. I did
yeah,
from about year 2 to year 6 of my atheist. I definitely and such, but
right,
it's been a while.
right, yeah. And so it's just, I think that's what I would teach. And um some of that stuff, I guess, is hard to teach because you know it's just interacting with people. If you just how well you can read people, it's hard to teach that, I guess.
Okay,
But everybody should still try it.
I'd like yes. I'd like to open up to the room. Does anybody else have any further questions, comments for Mark? Anybody? Boom. We have a bunch of quiet introverts that are
No
attracted
worries.
to the show. It's obvious. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're good at typing. Can SE be used effectively with an agenda to convince somebody towards a position?
You mean like an agenda that's not true, or or just your own agenda, or mm,
How about if
like
I believe evolution really, really, really is true, and I'm talking to a theist? Can I convince them toward evolution is true?
well, it would be used to show, or it would be used to help them gain the access or insight to their position is false, but not necessarily that evolution is true. Am I saying that right? Would that make sense?
Okay.
Because you're
So
not
it's
professing a
okay for you to
position.
come to the position. It's okay for you to come to the position that young Earth is false. That's okay to come with that position, but not that evolution is true.
Oh no, no, that's not what I'm saying. Well, I don't come with a position. I wouldn't. I guess when I do SC, I don't come with a position like that. I don't. Yeah. But I'll examine if
Okay.
someone says that. But if someone says that their position is that the Earth is 6,000 years old, I'll
Mhm.
try to ask the same kinds of questions. Whether the person says that Earth is, 5.6 billion years old, um,
Mhm.
I'll try to approach it the same. I try to approach it the
4.6.
same
I'm
way.
gonna fight you.
Oh,
I'm kidding.
4.6. That's right.
I'm messing with you. Yeah.
Is it 4.6? Yeah, right.
Yeah. Whatever it is.
Whatever.
Are you aware of some of the criticisms of SE? Some see it as dishonest and maybe manipulative. And if you think, then do you think there's any merit to any of those complaints?
It's dishonest if you don't tell people what you're doing. I mean, when when I invite people on, I send them an old. Everybody gets an old clip, an old show that they can listen to. So full disclosure, you can see what I do. You can see I ask a lot of the same questions, and I think it can be dishonest. Yeah, if you are talking to someone and you are challenging the reliability of their beliefs and they don't know you're doing that, yeah, I think there's an ethical principle behind it. They should know what's going on.
Okay. So disclosure and consent, and then you're good. Good.
Disclosure,
Thank you.
consent, and that's it. Yeah.
Good. Good. All right. We're at 58 minutes. Do you
Yeah.
have? I I'm not going to cut you off. If you have more to say, I want to hear from you. Is there anything else you'd like to address
No,
to the group?
I really, I think these last 6 months have been really a good 6 months for me that I've joined the SE community. Um, I really, it's a good community. I mean, people have reached out to me, and people have been really, nice, and people have told me what they've liked about the shows. They told me what they don't like, but in a nice way of how I think I should change things. And often take up, I often take those kinds of advice. I take that kind of advice very seriously. If someone emails me and it's not a hate email, um, I take what they say, people say, very seriously, because I want to do a good job. I keep on doing a better job at this. I want to keep on learning, and I think that is what I like about the SE community, is that it invites people who are in this community are generally open kind of people. They are generally people who want to learn. They're generally people who want to know what is true. I mean, how could you not like somebody who wants to know true things? And I hope it remains this way. I hope I hope it stays this way. It's a cool thing.
Okay. It seems like we are ready to close. We are done with the questions. I really appreciate you coming to the show today.
Thank you.
Here is a list of 5 of my favorite SE related channels. You can't see it, They can.
Okay.
These, along with several others, are on the promoted list on my channel. If you are really into street epistemology, want to understand about the methods, and there's great resources on streetepistemology.com, provided by Street Epistemology International. Thank you much, Mark, for
Thank you,
coming,
Doc.
and all the other guests on the channel. This has been a delight. I wouldn't do this without you. I couldn't do this without you.
Thanks for doing this. This was really
And
a great idea.
thank you. Thank you very much. And if you out there would like to be a guest on my channel for discussion about SE or any of the other of the 8 categories that I do on this show, I look forward to hearing from you.